With that, I'd like to turn it over to David. David May is one of our more recent graduates of Master Gardener training. And my delight with David, and there's no doubt about this, is certainly as a Master Gardener coordinator, I love to have people that like to come into the clinic and will answer all those questions that pop into our office. So David is one of those people that is there every Friday, and I certainly appreciate his diligence and his working with others. So David, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for presenting today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, the plant and insect clinic's fun for me, at least. For work, I do a lot of troubleshooting for computer issues, and doing something a little different is, but similar is a good time, I think. So, yeah, bring all your problems in and give us something difficult to find. So, putting your garden to bed. Yeah, when I was asked to give this, they said make sure you don't just cover the giant list of things to do with your garden for the winter, because it gets long and everybody gets lost after a while with a big list of items. And I found there's lots of websites and organizations that already have a lot of information, checklists and things on what to do for getting your garden ready for winter. And I've got some of those linked at the end of the slide deck. So um, like they said, if you want a copy of this, we can get you a copy. We'll have those links in it. So I'm kind of touching on some of those highlights, plus mostly hitting on what I'm doing. And one of the interesting things I found was doing the Master Gardener training and meeting all the more experienced gardeners than myself is everybody's really trying new things all the time. There's not always a one set way to do it, and everybody's learning. So, you can ask the same person, different people, the same question that have done the same, training and experiences, and they'll have different answers for you. So this will be kind of my experience right now with what I've learned and what I'm doing. So, yeah, basically what I just already told you in a shorter form. A live look into how I'm getting my garden ready for the winter and the next season. So there was I kind of just 4 steps are really the main things I'm focusing on this year to get ready, kind of planning for the next, few months, for the winter, fall into the winter, getting ready for the cleanup and mulching is a big thing I'm doing this year, and the next steps after that. So first, planning that I've been doing is looking at really, our hardiness zone kind of determines a lot of what we do, and the average fall frost dates is kind of the big thing down there at the bottom of the slide, October 29th. That's kind of the average. So if you're planning on doing things with plants before the frost, you probably want to give it a week or two before the average, just to be on the safe side. And a lot for myself, that really comes into kind of what I'll hit on next. But as the plants start dying off, we've already noticed in my garden, the sunflowers and the tomatoes really started going fast. Noticing, the yellowing in the leaves, the disease kicking in, and the plants shutting down. So those are the first things to start planning on what you're going to do with those spaces. And I like to call it Septober. It's kind of a mix of that September, October. A lot of times those months kind of blend in together. It depends on the year. But that's kind of that preparation for the fall and winter is Septober. So cover crops are a big thing that I haven't really done before, and this is where I'm learning in this process. In the past, in my learning process, I didn't do anything with my raised beds or my garden spaces in the winter, and then in the spring when I was trying to get ready for planting again, the soil was pretty rough shape, and had to do a lot of work to get it workable and usable again. And then the next step was making sure to mulch my beds and cover them in the winter before the rains and the snow really hit and the freezing weather. And I've done some of both with artificial covers, like they sell crop bed covers or just plastic sheeting. Cardboard is another popular one. People do newspapers, but I've really liked using a natural cover mulch, like wood chips from your yard, or you can usually get really pretty cheap wood bark products. Cedar bark mulch is one that I really like a lot. So I try to get that on before the rains. And what I'm trying differently this time with the cover crops is planting a crop that will essentially grow for a while and provide some benefits to the soil. And as the frost really hit, the freeze hits, then those crops die and create a natural mulch to protect the soil. Then in the spring, you mulch those, work those into your soil, and you've got some organic matter in your soil ready for you to go. And let's see, other things that you need to plan for. Pruning, what kind of trees you have, when you need to prune. I've mostly got fruit trees. I've got a few southern magnolias and a lot of fig trees. So I'm, waiting mostly for the fig trees. I'm waiting till the leaves fall off or start to fall off, and then I'll prune them to shape that I want for next year. Fertilizing, a lot of different types of plants and things. We'll need a good fertilizer boost in the spring. Some people fertilize in the fall. Lawns, you'll want to fertilize in the fall. So kind of planning when you want to do that. And then document your plan. That's the key for me, especially. I can easily forget things. And, if it's, I have the same saying at work, if you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. Or if it's worth doing, it's worth writing down. So I found that to be a big help with my gardening too. There's a lot of tools out there that you can use. Really just anything to start. Writing on paper with pencil or pen is good. I'll show you a couple of things I've been using a little bit later. And using available guides. Don't need to reinvent the wheel or spend too much time researching. Oregon State University has a really cool garden calendars site page up where they've got a page for each month that lists all the kind of tasks that you can do for your garden in that month. So those are good places to start. And most of our area, in Cowlitz County is going to be in zone 8B, a little higher up. You're going to have 8A, a little bit colder temperatures. And one thing is, don't forget your microclimates in your property, on your yard. My yard isn't huge. There are definitely areas where, a neighbor's container that they've got up against the fence is shielding, providing, a section of my yard over against the fence with quite a bit more shade and less sun. And so it's almost like almost like being in an 8A instead of an 8B when you're on that part of the yard. Other people can get areas, if you got a hill where you can get a lot of wind that chills the plants faster, and a lot of variables. So kind of pay attention to those when you're planning what to do. And like I said, last year I focused on mulching and pruning as kind of the new things I was really kind of learning. And this year it's the cover crops. And if it's overwhelming to start, I've found pick the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, the things that have the most impact and are easiest to get. All right, pulling all the weeds and the organic material that you don't want to compost back into your beds. Picking that and then mulching your beds. That's a big thing that was easy for me to hit last year. Think about what you want to winterize. If you have plants in containers, I've got a lot of herbs in containers and some of my fig trees in containers, and for the winter, I'll mulch them, add a little mulch in there, actually, organic mulch from my yard, and get that set for the winter and bring it into the garage or up on my deck against the house. So I don't have to do a lot with them. Whereas the beds, I need to do a different approach with more mulching and bulbs. Maybe you have flower bulbs you need to pull in. This year we added some dahlias that we hadn't done before, so I'm gonna get the experience of winterizing those, digging those up pretty soon. Oops, I didn't want to do that yet. And then planning what you're going to do with your plants and leaves from your yard. Some of the material from your garden you don't want to mulch into your beds or into your compost piles. If there's any plant material that's diseased, or maybe you had issues that you couldn't figure out with plants dying, I'd say don't mulch those into your compost. Just throw those away. Tomatoes, they can build up diseases in the soils, so it's probably a good idea not to mulch those back into your beds. Yeah, leaves from your yard can make a good natural mulch. You obviously want to be careful if a tree that's dropping leaves has a virus or disease, you may not want to use those. Bag those up and put them in the garbage. Those are a couple things I didn't think about before. And then cleanup, just in general. Clutter will attract insects you may not want, pests. Especially, I've got some chickens and birds in my backyard, and if I don't have that area, it's really kind of an extension of my garden, and if I don't have that cleaned up and organized, free from clutter, the rats from neighboring yards will quickly move in and take advantage of the cover. So keeping that nice and clean keeps it a good environment for the plants and the animals you have. And my plan for this year, this is kind of a rough outline, crop rotations. Now, this is something I'm kind of experimenting with. You'll get a lot of conflicting information if you're just searching online. Some people insist on it, say it's the only way to go, and some people say you don't need to worry about it. Really, the main thing is with disease buildup and things in the soil that can afflict your plants. If you plant the same thing too many years in a row, and you start having your tomatoes dying faster, maybe it's a good idea to cycle those out and plant a different plant that's not in the same family as the tomatoes. So this year I'm practicing some of that with not just for disease resistance, but for nutrient use. I'm trying to pick plants that, like this year in my tall raised bed, you can kind of see a part of it on that picture on the top right of the screen. I've got a big trellis up there, and those are the strings hanging down that I grew the tomatoes up on. And next year I'm going to plant pole beans in there. So a different plant with a different family that has different pests and diseases associated with it. So it'll kind of give the bed a rest and use different nutrients that the tomatoes may not have used. And yeah, so beds that had the nightshade family, the tomatoes and the eggplants and those things, I'm going to do beans and carrots and beets. The bed that had my beets in it last year is going to have I'm just going to do some sun gold cherry tomatoes and some San Marzanos, I'm probably going to try a couple different hybrids, not a ton of tomatoes next year, so cycle those out. And then in the bottom right there, it's a raised bed that I built a cloche over that really helps with extending the season earlier in the spring and later in the fall and into the winter even. Last year I did have some good success with just some grains like bok choy that I grew over the winter just in a exposed raised bed, and it gave me grains all winter long, which was nice. But in that cloche bed, I'm going to be putting, let's see, well, you can kind of see in that picture there, I've got some broccoli that's growing that I'll probably be harvesting in a little while. And then behind that on the left side is some leeks that I'm growing as a fall winter crop. And then you can kind of see the some of the dill and a few carrots got out of hand and decided to go to seed. So I've since pulled those out and prepped the right side of that bed for putting in some greens that will go through the winter. And then the cover crops that like in the other raised beds I have, I'm going to be planting Austrian field peas and see how those do. The nice thing that I've learned with the peas and that family of crops is they will sequester nitrogen into the soil. They actually, most plants use the nitrogen out of the soil, and the pea family will use the nitrogen out of the air and store the excess in their roots, as long as they have the correct I forgot the word suddenly, bacteria in the soil for it. And then when you mulch those peas in after they've died and you kind of mix them in, mulch them in spring, you've automatically got the organic material and nitrogen ready for the next year's plants to use. So I'll be excited to see how that goes. And then in the other areas, there's some other areas back around a composting area and my chicken pens that I'm going to try some oats in the ground and use those for a cover crop in those areas. Yeah, so what I've been doing the last month is preparing my beds for that, pulling out the old plants, and just recently, just this last week ago or 2 weeks ago, planted those field peas. Yeah, I touched on mulching trees and other beds or containers, right? Adding a little organic material in there, and then like a cedar mulch or wood chips of some kind over the top to keep that soil safe from excess rain and cold. And one thing to be aware of is a lot of the mulches, if you're using a wood bark, will kind of acidify the soil. So if you're planting, if it's blueberries and figs and things like that don't mind and like a more acidic soil, that'll be a good thing. But for some of the plants, you'll want to, pay attention to that and maybe use a different mulch that's not as acidic, like, some of the straws, or I've seen hemp mulch being more popular now. There's a lot of options out there. Even like, shredded newspaper and cardboard can work. And the other thing with my winterization, I have a couple different compost methods I'm using, but for most of my yard waste, I've got 2 large compost bays that I built with pallets, and I build one up over the year, and try and turn it over inside that bay, and I pull from the other bay with the ready to go mulch, so to speak, from the other bay from the previous year's organic waste, and that's been really nice. And so I just got down to the bottom of that, and now I turned that whole big pile over and into the other bay. So then in the spring, I'll start working from the new mulch that was created this year. And then general cleanup. Keeping a record, I touched on. This little picture here on the left side, that's just giving me a kind of a really rough layout of what I want to do. And I just did that in Google Drawing, and there's a lot of options you can use. There's expensive products you can use, free, you can write it on paper. And this is just giving me an idea of what I want to do. And on the top right there, it's a program called, I didn't put a note on there for that. It's called Seed Time. They have free options, and then there's subscriptions you can do that have more features. But this is an example from somebody else that has been using it. The cool thing I found about that is you can tell them the crop you're planting, and it'll kind of tell you good times to plant it, because it takes your information on your average first and last frost date and kind of gives you a good idea of when to plant. You can modify it based on when you want to harvest, and then it gives you all the tasks that you would normally look up on charts and things. It's like, okay, plant here, start the seeds indoors here, prepare the beds, plant them in the soil, transplant, your maintenance work on the beds, and then when to harvest. And it's a pretty cool product. So it's, worth checking out. There's other options like it that are out there too, but I found it to be pretty useful for documentation. And they even have journaling options in the app and on their website where you can keep notes of your garden as you go through the year and tasks and things. And the one nice thing is they have a lot of integrations with all the major seed producers. So if you have a specific variety from a specific manufacturer or producer, they'll have that usually in there. I've used the Territorial Seeds Garden Planner, which is pretty good. They primarily have information on their seeds specifically, plus they have generic stuff. But I found the Seed Time app to be a little bit more useful. And cleanup. Here's some pictures from my personal bed cleanup. You can see on the left top there, the the sunflowers are looking pretty sad, and most of the tomatoes are already out, but on the right side of that picture, you can see the tomatoes that pretty much died off. And so on the right top picture, you can see the sunflowers are gone, the tomatoes are gone. I've transplanted the marigolds out of that bed to different places in my yard, and had some people come over and take some basil that they wanted, and I'll probably just knock the rest of those down and mulch those into my bed, and then plant. And then I planted the field peas right on top of those, so they'll grow up and die down as the winter gets really cold. And then you can see that picture in the center. That's my mulching bays. On the left is where I just turned most of that bed from the right over to the left, basically turning it upside down. And this on the right will be what I'm pulling from, in the fall and throughout next year for my my yard mulch. And the totally not trick question there at the bottom. Do you want to cut the plant off at ground level or remove the whole plant? And the trick is if you pull the whole plant up, then you're going to be disturbing the soil a lot more and possibly removing beneficial things. Like if you have peas, all those nitrogen nodules that formed on the roots will get pulled out. So generally, unless there's, disease or pest concerns with the plant, cutting it off at the base and leaving it in and mulching it in provides a lot of good benefits for your plants for the next year. And then diseased plant material, that's a new thing that I hadn't really thought of before. My master gardener training was, sometimes there's those plants that maybe had a weird mold or a fungus on them that killed your plant and you couldn't figure out what was going on. Don't throw that into your compost piles, bag that up and put it into the garbage so it doesn't perpetuate throughout your garden. And you can see the chickens there. They're good helpers with the mulch compost distribution. They like to spread it out and mix it in. So they're, so 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Occasionally I have to shovel the stuff back into the bay. Yeah. And just a couple example pictures I found. The top left isn't too bad, but there are a lot of, if you're actively growing stuff there, it's one thing, but there's a lot of nooks and crannies and holes for rodents and other animals and bugs to hide in. In the winter, if you clean out your pots and you stack them up and get them ready for the next year, there'll be a lot better situation. Just a couple of things I pulled from some other lists that I found useful in the past. If you've got tomatoes that aren't ripened up yet, bring them inside and they'll pretty much ripen up inside for you. Cleaning your pots is a big thing. You can disinfect them in the fall and in the spring before you use them, but I found just giving them a good wash, and then in the spring before you use them, give them a 10-to-1 water to bleach mixture rinse to really sanitize them before you plant in there. And cover your potting mix in soil. I've had soil that I left out over the winter, didn't cover, and then when I went to use it, it was like fungus gnat city. So I didn't end up using that soil really, put it into the compost. Yeah, and then debris as it happens, if you got fruit falling off your trees or leaves falling off your trees, clean those up into piles so you don't get slugs and other bugs built up all around your yard, kind of concentrate that material. And really doing some good tool maintenance towards, as we get into the fall, you stop using your pruners and your clippers and your trimmers and, wash them. They've got a lot of good tools, cleaners and oils to keep them maintained regularly, and then give them a good sharpening, because a good clean cut on your plants is really beneficial for them and helps them in the long run. And one thing I hadn't thought of before, which should have been obvious, is, oiling your wood tools. The handles will break down and get worn from the sun and the wind, and keeping them oiled up will help them to last a lot longer. And a few other things, just if you need a list of things that I've added into my mix, rolling up your hoses that you're not using, make sure they're drained. Any drip systems that you've got, take those down and get them winterized so they don't freeze and break. I mentioned, cleaning, sharpening your other tools, and stacking up any tomato cages, trellises that you've got, cleaning those up. And the mulching I hit on a little bit, you can use that leaf material if you have a lot of trees that are dropping leaves. I don't have a lot right now, so I don't have a lot of leaf mulch. Down at the bottom, there's a picture of some cover crops that are growing in some beds. Looks like they're using some kind of a cereal grain. And nothing wrong with if you don't have anything else, just cover the area to keep it protected from hard frost and rain washing away all the nutrients. And since cover crops has been a thing I've really been looking into and researching, here's some better information on those. A few links there. Portland Nursery has some good resources. That picture on the top right, the Austrian field peas, they sell a lot of cover crops there at Portland Nursery, and I got a big bag of field peas for my beds, and they come pre-inoculated, so they're ready to go and be planted in your beds. And I went for the field peas because I wanted something that would kind of sequester that extra nitrogen. Yeah, and I'm gonna experiment with some oats in another part of my yard, like I said. But kind of depending on what your property is like, what your garden's like, you may favor one thing over another. Something like a wheat or oats that you can just kind of rye, that you can just scatter over a large area. If you have a large field that you're gardening in, you can do something easier like that. Some of the clovers work really well for cover crops. Yeah, I guess you kind of sometimes have to be a little careful with those because they can really spread out of control. If that's a bad thing for you, I don't mind the clovers. And there was a couple, which one was it? Yeah, do your research into the different cover crops if you think you're gonna like one over the other. There's a few of them that are really good cover crops, but you want to knock them down if they don't die naturally before they go to seed, because you don't want that spreading out of control in your yard if that's an undesired result. Yeah, so I will have some report on that next year, I guess, and let you know how the cover crop's gone and if it benefited my gardens. And these are things I've already done, the things I'm going to do. Let's see if I haven't covered any of these. staking your flowers, your bulbs, some of your tall flowers that aren't quite done yet. My dahlias and hollyhocks aren't done. So I staked them up a little taller because they were starting to get past where I had attached them to their stakes. I did dethatch and aerate my lawn and fertilized it and got some of my cover crops in, not quite all of them. And dividing and repotting herbs. Yeah, a lot of the herbs will fill up their pots and start to get a little bit root bound. You can divide them into multiple pots, or you can, trim them back to a smaller plant and get them ready for next year. Winterizing peppers, that's something that I did last year for the first time. It's interesting. I didn't know you could do that. You can, as the peppers start to die down for the year, you can trim off of their leaves and kind of really trim them back to a kind of a shape of what you want to start with on your pepper plant, and then kind of mulch it and store it somewhere, cool, and make sure it doesn't dry out and run out of water. And when things warm up in the spring, they pick right up and they start putting out leaves again. Sometimes they'll start putting out leaves, depending how warm your storage place is. If your garage gets a little warm, or if you have them in your house, they'll possibly start to push leaves out. If it's too early, you can just trim those off. But then you've got a head start on your peppers. Yeah, I'm pulling out my drip systems, and yeah, a little bit later, after my artichokes are all done, my rhubarb's done, I'll cut those back and mulch over those so they don't die in the winter. Yeah, I've got a few geraniums and my figs that I'm going to be propagating a little bit later this month. Dig up the tuber and bulbs. And seed saving, I know there's a class coming up on seed saving. It's really fun to if you've got particular flowers that you really liked, maybe they're a little different from what you've had in the past, you can save those seeds and plant them again next year. And yeah, my wapato, it's a native plant, also called like duck potatoes. There's a bunch of different names for it. I've got a little mini wetland habitat that I've built up for it. And those grow in the kind of marshy ground, and they produce these little roots that you can eat. They're a little bit bitter, but they're interesting native food source. Actually, hold on. I think I'll go back to questions. I had a few pictures here to show you. Seed saving examples. Here's some cosmos as the flowers. I was deadheading them more throughout the summer. Now I've let them start to, kind of the flowers to die off and produce the seeds, and then I've already started plucking those off, and once they dry out, I'll save the seeds and store them for next year. In the bottom right picture there, it's kind of my kiwi trellis, an overhead trellis, and then I have a lot of I've experimented different types of flowers in this area, and you see a lot of straw flowers there right now. Saving seeds from those because I really liked it was an apricot peach variety that I really liked. A couple other things for seed saving, on the left is a tobacco that you let those little nodes dry up and you can pull the seeds out of those. They're really pretty flowers that really open up and bloom at night for the moths and the bats. It's pretty fun. Hollyhocks, you can save the seeds from those. Figs, not for the seed saving, but for the propagation. They'll be ready soon. And then some verbena. I haven't tried saving seeds from those yet, but I'm gonna see what I can do. A few more examples. Snapdragons, nasturtium. Nasturtium, they're really good at propagating. You don't usually need to save the seeds from those, but if you have a color that you really liked, like this one, they all came from the same seeds, but this one plant has this really cool kind of striation variegation in the leaves. So I'm going to try and save some seeds from that one specifically. I thought that was a neat look that it got. Marigolds and straw flowers are really easy to harvest the seeds from. This is one of my other, this is the bed that had the beets in it. So when I pulled the beets out, I cut the greens off that I'll eat most of the greens if they're not too bug damaged, and the ones that I didn't end up using, throw them back on the bed and mix them in, and then get covered up with mulch, and it's kind of pre-composted with organic matter. Maybe it looks like the soil settled a little bit. I might add a little bit more in there. This is some of my, you can tell they've recently been repotted and divided because some of these herbs look a little sad. They'll perk up again. I got, let's see, from the top left, I've got some Thai basil and then some French tarragon. And then on the bottom left, that's some marjoram, and then some sweet basil and some winter savory and summer savory. So those are some of the herbs that I've added this year. Some of those links I was talking about, Portland Nursery, actually they have a lot of good resources. WSU, OSU have a lot of good resources too. Yeah, I think I'll go back to the questions. Yeah. So hopefully you've got some information out of there. Kind of see what I've been focusing on, what I've been interested in this year. There's so much you can hit on with winterizing. You got all your lawn tasks, your yard tasks, I didn't even touch on like the azaleas and hydrangeas and the front flower bed with the fuchsias and all sorts of other plants up there. So yeah, it's I guess open it up for questions.
We have one out of the chat. It says, how do you propagate your fuchsia?
That's going to be a new one for me. I haven't grown them in a bed like I did this year in my front garden. So I'm just getting into the process of figuring out how to propagate those. So I don't have the answer for that, but I will soon.
Okay.
If one of the other gardeners has info on that, they can answer that.
Other questions, please speak up. I'm going to go ahead and. Anybody? Questions? Comments?
How do you like those? I think you called them savories.
Yeah. That was a new one for me this year. Because I had heard about them, and there's actually another one, a lemon savory, that I haven't grown yet. Those are a little harder to find, but they are kind of, from what I read and what I've been able to confirm growing them, they are kind of a mix between like a rosemary and a sage, or not a sage, a rosemary and a thyme.
So you're mostly, you don't use them fresh in salads. You dry them and use them as some sort of a. Now, what do you put them in?
You can use them. You can use them fresh or dried. I've mostly been using them fresh, actually. Sprinkling them on salads works. I've actually tried putting them in like sandwiches. I've even used them like in a grilled cheese, and sprinkle a little bit in there, and it's kind of you don't need a lot, but it's kind of nice. I've used a little bit in experimenting using them with some. What did I do? I did a roasted potatoes. Kind of really simple with olive oil and salt and pepper, and then put some of the savory on there, and that was a good result from that.
Are they kind of bitter, or are they more on the sweet side, or?
I'd say they're really similar to thyme.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
David, I've got another question from Joanne. She says, do you run over the leaves with a mower first before scattering them, or do you mix them with or do you mix them with grass clippings?
This last winter, spring time, I I just took the leaves from my cherry trees and I didn't run over them first, and I did mix them with some grass clippings, and I used them as the basis for a new bed that I had built. Actually, I did some larger sticks and twigs and things, and then I did the leaves and the grass clippings. So I just did them whole like that. If you're mulching on top of your bed, I think I don't know. I've seen people do it both ways.